Welcome to the Silver Screen Project, where we look back at a series of films in anticipation of an exciting new cinema release.
In preparation for the brand new Marvel film Doctor Strange, The Multiverse of Madness, we've gone back and watched 2016's Doctor Strange. What did you think of Doctor Strange, Sam?
I actually really enjoyed it.
Same.
I thought there wasn't quite as much kind of crazy magic. I remember thinking this initially as you kind of were hoping for this kind of first foray into the magical world.
Yeah.
But there's some very cool stuff in this. Definitely.
I remember thinking at the time, like, it's kind of surprised me of how good it was because we
Yeah.
were kind of in that era where we were a bit past origin stories.
Yeah, and I think for an origin story, it's quite careful. It doesn't retread too much stuff, and you kind of move through at least the early part of its story quite quickly.
Definitely one of, if not the best post-phase 1 origin story.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with you there because it gets to the point very quickly, whereas certain things... I liked Captain Marvel, but I think Captain Marvel took a little while to get going. That's the one that sticks in my mind there.
And I think partly because it was something we hadn't seen before in Marvel with the magical element.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think that, as I said, the magical stuff, a lot of it is kind of this kind of sparks and kind of magical kung fu kind of thing, which is visually interesting, but it does kind of wear thin by the end of it, I'd say.
Yeah, one thing I noticed, actually, kind of maybe a bit disagree with you there.
Right,
I was quite impressed with the kind of different uses of magic. Things like the mirror universe, and maybe like the sling hooks, and as well as other, particularly having just watched the Fantastic Beasts films where it's just lasers shooting each other. Seeing a magical world where it isn't just lasers shooting each other, I was like, this is a pleasant surprise.
I think there's much more than those films. I think because a lot of it is those kind of sparky orange moves, even with the sling rings and also the other thing. Because of that, it doesn't have, like, if you look at comic panels, there's like multiple different things going on. And I think that's so that all the sorcery in the MCU has this kind of color coding, so it's easy. And then Iron Man can have kind of his repulsors, and do you know what I mean? It's very easy to kind of understand the difference. You know, Asgardian magic is maybe a bit more golden, you know, it's all that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
But generally, I think it wasn't heavily criticized, but I don't think it was like people were amazed when this came out.
No, it didn't get quite the same reception as, say, like Black Panther.
Yes.
And I think I like this more than Black Panther.
I think I remember liking it. I mean, we saw it in the cinema. We saw it in not 4D,
we saw it in
IMAX. And I remember very much enjoying. There's some sequences in this we can delve right into it, I suppose.
Yeah, no.
Some of the kind of visually trippy sequences, I think, stand up really well.
The first one where the Ancient One knocks Strange into the astral projection.
Yeah.
That whole sequence is incredible.
I think that's fantastic. That stands up really well. And I know parts of this were in the trailer, but there's a lot to that, which, you know, was a surprise even at the time. It doesn't ever really get back to that. Some of the Dark Dimension stuff kind of leans into it.
But then also the Mirror Universe stuff, it kind of remind me of like turning Inception up to 11.
Yeah, it really is. Especially the scene where Mordo and Doctor Strange are kind of having that chase with Caecilius. I was going to say Cagliostro, but that's the guy they talk about with the books or whatever.
Yeah.
It is exactly what you say. Inception turned up to 11. And the mirror dimension is just complete nonsense. And there's no rules for it, really. And it's just the thing. But it looks great.
And they established it early on. Unlike in the Wizarding World when they introduced a mirror dimension 8 films in.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, Doctor Strange himself, what did you think of the kind of character?
I like it because he's a knob.
He's such a twat at the start.
It's like even up until kind of they start fighting Caecilius, he's just a knob. Yeah. And I really like that. Obviously, we see it a bit with Tony Stark. Yeah. A lot of people thought, oh, he's just another Tony Stark.
I think he's much more of a twat than Tony Stark.
And because he's so arrogant and like Tony Stark's arrogant, but his entire personality is I'm arrogant.
Yeah, and I think they did that well, where he's a bit more snarky and he's a bit more kind of bitter and kind of full of himself. Whereas Tony Stark has got this kind of laid back kind of, you know, and there's the part after the surgery at the start where he's kind of walking along and he's just like, and he's like doing a little dance and you're just like, you're such a little...
And you see it when he has his surgery in his hands and he's like, I could have done better.
I mean, that scene I think is one of the better. It's a really good part of that.
He really believes that he's better than any other surgeon in the world.
And the whole that whole origin moves. That part moves very quickly. I was surprised how quickly he's in the car, and that all kind of kicks off.
Yeah,
and that whole scene there, and he moves into kind of wasting all his money and all that, and the bit where they get to Kamartage, all of that with the physiotherapist and stuff, I think is a really interesting way of kind of getting
there. It's got some of the classic Marvel humor at that point as well, with like the Wi-Fi code and one being like, we're not barbarians.
I don't think it's the funniest MCU film. I think a lot of the jokes fall flat, but one that I remember from the trailer, the Mr. Doctor thing, I think stands up quite well. I think that's a funny bit.
Good. I think it's quite interesting as well, because weirdly Doctor Strange has been in like 4 or 5 films since this. Bit parts in like Avengers and Thor Ragnarok, etc., Spider-Man. I think it's one thing that I noticed going back to this was seeing that Wong is just a deadpan straight character.
That's what I was thinking.
And I kind of forgot that he used to be that, because he is. They even joke that like he never laughs until
it's
he
only
makes a
right
joke.
at the end. Yeah, and it's Doctor Strange has really cracked his shell.
Like I think what was the last time we saw him? Shang-Chi.
No, he's in No Way Home. He goes away at the start, and he's become the Sorcerer Supreme.
Even there, he's just kind of, he's a lot more like relaxed and kind of fun guy. And it's like, oh yeah, I forgot that he was like.
I mean, speaking of the Sorcerer Supreme, getting into nitpicks early, but we can always go back and forth. But the fact that by the end of it, Doctor Strange has somehow, he kind of is unofficially the Sorcerer Supreme.
Yeah.
Do they say that he is?
I think they do.
But it's like, this is another thing. How long has he been training for?
That is one thing.
It's very vague. And I get that he's got this photographic memory. He's very good at kind of progression.
I think he's very good at training, but I think it is implied it's several months of training.
But still.
And it does play into the whole, like, he is like the chosen one. He's born for this.
Yeah.
So he picks up quicker than the other people. I like there's fun little bits, like when Caecilius first attacks, when he first has the fight with him and he's running through and he gets the cloak. The cloak's great in this.
Good stuff.
And like the bits where he's dropping people into random doors and then just shutting the doors and they're just stuck in the desert.
And that's the thing, at that point, he isn't that good, really. He's got the knowledge and he's got the basics, but he's not that good, and that's interesting because it puts him on a back foot. And it's even by the end, he kind of uses tricks to get his way up, and it's only in Infinity War that he's this kind of Sorcerer Supreme that we know him as, which works for an origin film completely.
I remember quite liking the fact that he wasn't all powerful by the end of it, because it gave him space to grow. And if he immediately becomes super powerful, then it's like, well, what do you do with the character now, sort of thing. Dormammu also looked very cool.
Yeah, played by Benedict Cumberbatch as well.
Didn't really get too much to do, but he wasn't the villain. He was just the looming threat.
I feel like it could be something that comes back, maybe even as like a combined threat with something else.
I do think
like
that ending was great.
I think it's great, and it shows, because Ancient One has a kind of conversation with him about it's not about you kind of thing, and him willingly kind of sacrificing himself potentially forever is kind of how he does it. And it's very it's the whole thing of there's no time in the dark dimension, bringing the time in. It is quite clever.
It was very like outside of the box. I didn't see it coming when I first saw it.
No.
And then when you see it start happening, you're like, this is clever.
And then he comes back down to the confrontation with Caecilius, and they don't even realize what's happened because he's kind of stepped out of time, which is quite fun. The use of time with the Eye of Agamotto is quite fun. Like, and we get the confirmation right at the end that it's an Infinity Stone, Infinity Gem, whatever they're calling it in these. What did you think about Mordo? I thought the way that Chiwetel Ejiofor plays him is with such like Shakespearean kind of gravitas that I really like it, but it kind of stands out when you notice it. Like, it's almost comical how like he's playing it so seriously, kind of thing. And I'm excited to see him. I think he's going to be in the new one coming out.
I think he was in a trailer.
And I don't think we've seen him since this film.
No, we haven't. We obviously in the post-credit scene, he's I would say turned band, but it's like he's got his own moral system.
He's such like a nerd. Like, he's like, oh, the rules were broken, I'm gonna become evil. Like, it doesn't really fly with me.
Although I like Chiwetel Ejiofor's performance, it is very like he's clearly gonna turn bad by the end of this.
And I think most people going in, you do like a cursory bit of research about it, and you think, oh, Doctor Strange's biggest villain, probably Dormammu and Baron Mordo come up, and you're like, oh, okay.
But I like Chiwetel Ejiofor, so I'd quite like to see him do more,
and maybe more. And he uses that kind of Shakespearean voice as an evil guy will work really well, I think.
One thing that I wasn't a huge fan of, which by the fact that we've got this far before really saying anything too much, I think Mads Mikkelsen was a bit wasted.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've got someone of the caliber of Mads Mikkelsen, who we all know is a fantastic actor.
He's barely in this,
and he doesn't have much to do.
No. And it's kind of wasted his MCU. I mean, he can come back. The way they end, they kind of turn into weird desiccated husks and fly up in the air. It's quite funny.
But the Kaecilius' story is quite interesting because he is right. Yes. He's got the wrong end goal because he's been tainted by Dormammu. But it's easy to see why he's gone that path, because the Ancient One is using the Dark Dimension.
And that whole reveal is quite interesting.
You see it in the opening scene where she uses the Mirror Dimension. He calls her a hypocrite, his first line.
Yeah, that's
so right. So it's there from the start.
Because she's got the hood up, you don't see that. Yeah.
But I think the character is interesting. They could have done a lot more. And
I agree, yeah.
It's a shame that Mads Mikkelsen... I felt similar about Idris Elba's Heimdall. Idris Elba could have been a much bigger role.
I think they could bring him back, but I also think he's probably signed off now, kind of thing.
Yeah.
What about the Ancient One herself?
I liked her.
Yeah.
I think
I can see what they were trying to do, because the Ancient One is
a racist caricature.
It is, yeah. But I think at the time they thought they were avoiding being racist, and now it kind of comes back to that
whitewashing type.
Yeah,
thing.
Surely you could have thought of maybe have a young guy who doesn't look like Fu Manchu, or like a woman, like an Asian, have like Michelle Yeoh or someone like that.
Yeah.
And they don't have to be a white woman.
Yeah.
I don't mind Tilda Swinton in this, but I think that's kind of one of the bigger missteps in this, I would say.
Yeah, I understand why they didn't want to go for an old Asian man.
It's the same with the Mandarin, really, initially,
But then, it's that thing of, well, at this point as well, there wasn't really any Asian characters in the MCU.
No, and they, Wong, we didn't know was going to be a major player. I think maybe apart from Tony Stark is like the most appeared character, including What If episodes.
Quite possibly.
Or maybe it's over maybe it's over Robert Downey Jr. because he's not in the What Ifs or something like that. Basically, Benedict Wong's stats are like high now. Basically.
Right, his stats.
He's got high stats. Yeah.
I think that's all I've got on my notes. I've got a couple bits of trivia.
Yeah, I mean, before you get into trivia, I was just going to ask you. You touched on it earlier, but which magical Mads Mikkelsen do you prefer, Kaecilius or Grindelwald?
I prefer probably Kaecilius because. Like Grindelwald, as we've kind of mentioned, doesn't really live up to the hype.
No.
Whereas Kaecilius, you can kind of understand his reasoning, why he's bad, and he does kind of do stuff.
Yeah, what they do with him is something, but it's just not enough for Mads Mikkelsen.
And I think his magic's more fun.
Yeah. And he's got those kind of ghost blades, which we don't really see anyone else use. Yeah. The last thing before you go into trivia, I was just going to say that I do not like Benedict Cumberbatch's accent in this. I think it's worse at the start when he's a bit of a cunt, and then it kind of gets better.
I've seen lots of people have this same criticism.
And I think it's got better as it goes on. And it's kind of this broad, it's like Hugh Laurier's House. It's kind of, it's a non-committal kind of accent. It's fine, but
I never really got too bothered by it.
I think in the opening scenes, it's very kind of noticeable for me. I don't know. I think it's because it's got this kind of snarkiness to it.
I think after years of seeing American actors try and do a British accent poorly, it's quite nice to see the shoe on the other foot. But he does grow into it as the films progress. It never really bothered me too much, but I understand why people weren't particularly happy with it.
Yeah.
So 2 bits of trivia I've got. The first one is the filmmakers defined the use of magic as dimensional traveling and shifting. We didn't want magic to simply be people throwing and blocking bolts of lightning. This is the ability to tap into different dimensions and pull aspects of those dimensions into our realm.
Okay.
So it's almost as if they've specifically looked at what they didn't like about the Harry Potter films and tried to make it more interesting. And it does heavily play on the dimension stuff, drawing energy from the dark dimension.
Yeah. They do try to kind of explain it in the kind of vague magical terms.
Yeah, it's not really bolts of lightning being shot at each other, which I like because that's a really boring way of showing magic. Do you know what I think?
Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah. And the other a bit of trivia I've got is Scott Derrickson, the director of this, admitted that the MCU films dedicate little time to developing antagonists.
Okay.
So he just hoped to show Caecilius' point of view, describing the character as a villain of ideas with watertight logic, like John Doe from Seven.
Okay.
And
I feel like maybe they cut some bits out there. Yeah, because
I can see where they're going, because it does make it clear that his line of thinking is correct according to him, and he's just kind of been molded the wrong way by Dormammu. But again, I don't think they give him enough screen time to fully develop him as much as they intended.
They could have done some kind of Loki scenes where he's on his own and maybe Dormammu's communicating. Maybe give that Dormammu character a bit more.
You never see him when he's not facing the Ancient One or Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
You never see him with his followers.
And that kind of works in the whole Joker way, where you just see him as this force that appears. And there is something to that, but it's just
when you're trying to build,
it's slightly too safe, maybe.
Yeah, when you're trying to build like a sympathetic villain, then you do need to show them when they're not just attacking the heroes.
Yeah.
But I still like Caecilius overall. So as always, as we come to an end, I shall ask you the all-important question as to whether or not this has got you more hyped for Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness. Prod yes or prod no?
Yeah, definitely a prod yes. I hadn't seen this maybe since we saw it in the cinema. I feel like I must have watched it since then, but it felt very fresh. And this, along with the next one we'll talk about, it's nice to watch them again. I'm very excited.
Yeah, I agree. I think I've seen it once, maybe like around 2018, 2019. And this definitely is a prod yes for me, because I was like, oh yeah, we've seen a lot of Doctor Strange, but it's nice seeing something focused on him.
Yeah, and that kind of personal stuff, get an idea of the character a bit more and stuff like that. And
I like the magical side of it, which we kind of dip in and out of in the MCU.
And we should see even more in this next one, hopefully, if things go right.
So that is the first silver screen project of this series in the build-up to Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness. We've got one more that we'll cover and release soon, and then we'll be going to the cinemas.
Yay! Off to the silver screen.
Off to the silver screen. Thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to let us know your thoughts on Doctor Strange, please do.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think it's time to say goodbye.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next episode.
Bye.
Bye.